Bad Brad Berkwitt show is all about moving humanity forward and fighting for democracy. And remember, folks, every act of kindness is a little love we leave behind. My guest today started E.G. Smith Socks in 1982 and is the creator of the world famous Slouch sock. Debbie knew right away what it was and loved them. In Japan, his design of the loose sock has been the rage of Japanese schoolgirls for over a decade. He's also an award-winning documentary filmmaker. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to my show, the one and only Eric Smith. Forget about it. Well, first of all, good morning to you there on the East Coast. You're an hour ahead of me, Eric. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're gonna cover a lot of ground today, and I always tell all of my people that come on the show that we know the internet is not always correct. So if I have something wrong in my notes, please feel free to say, "Hey, Brad, it's actually this." I'm not offended by that one bit.
Okay, great.
Okay? So let's do
And
this.
vice versa.
Okay, let's do this. We're gonna start at the beginning and cover, like I said, a lot of different things. We'll take a commercial break. We'll keep filming. I don't keep recording. I don't turn it off, and then we'll go into the second half, which is just fun, random questions, which people seem to really enjoy. Okay.
Oh, good.
Okay. So it looks like you were born in Merrick, Long Island. Is that correct?
Eric from Eric, yes.
Okay. If you would talk about growing up there.
Well, it was kind of typical suburbia, but I really loved it because, we were one exit from Jones Beach. So in the summers, we used to get out there and then, you know, uh, I even used to cut out of high school and hitchhike with friends down to the beach, so that was great. And then the other thing too, it was so close to the Long Island Railroad and easy to get into the city, which my grandmother lived in New York City, and so I would often go to see her in the weekends. So it was just great, and I took advantage of that many, many times. So in that way, it was great. And then, just living in Long Island was, you know, a bubble.
Okay. And for the younger viewers, you notice Eric said hitchhike. That was pre-Uber and Lyft driving when it was a lot safer back then. I
Yeah,
wouldn't recommend that now pretty much to anybody.
yeah,
Hitchhiking.
yeah.
But those were the days, Jones Beach. I used to love Jones Beach. Okay. It looks like you went to NYU Law School in
No, New
19
York law.
New York, I'm sorry, New York Law
Yeah.
in 1982.
Well, that's when I graduated and took the bar.
Okay. Which you
Yeah,
passed on the first try, I want you
I
to know.
did.
Okay.
Unlike John Kennedy.
I was thinking we're tracking because when I saw that, I was thinking about John Kennedy too. I know it took him several
Boy,
times.
at least, yeah, he had to live that down in public, so
That's right.
in
That's
the
right.
public eye.
But what's interesting about your story at that point is instead of when you passed the bar the first time, instead of practicing law, you started E.G. Smith Socks, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So you pivoted. You went from law, where you passed the bar, into fashion. So for the viewers, explain the pivot and why.
Well, I went to law school because, what is a nice, you know, middle class Jewish guy from Long Island that doesn't know what he wants to do? You either become a doctor or a lawyer or work for your father, and none of those seemed like it was to be an option. So my father always said, do something. So I chose law school, and because I thought, well, maybe I would, be interested in either civil rights law or entertainment law. Um, but it was a great education because it taught me discipline, you know, uh, because, you can't get through law school without working. and putting your mind to something. And I just thought, well, if I could really find my passion, it would come in handy. And then also, it taught me about logical thinking. And ultimately, the business that I did go into, it was great help with just navigating a lot of the different aspects that, the law education brings, whether it's becoming an expert on a subject, right away that you need to for a certain case, like you need to know everything about swimming pools or something. So it gave me that kind of, research, ability to, bring that to, my business. So it wasn't all lost. Actually, I don't know that I could have done my business without that experience, that life experience, an educational experience.
Okay. And you created the Slouch sock, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, talk about that.
Well, the long story short is my father and my grandfather were in the sock business, and I tried to do everything to avoid, doing that. But at the time, my father was basically selling tube socks to the mass market, $10 a dozen, not $10 a pair. But he had this license for Field and Stream, and he was working with a mill up in upstate New York that had wool hunting socks.
Okay.
So, and they were dyeing them in bright colors, and I was putting myself through law school. So I said, "Oh, these are great," and I started, going to these stores on Christopher Street in New York, the gay street, that had little boutiques, and they started selling, off the shelves, and um, that was the beginning. And then I started realizing that, well, this is something that I think I really enjoy. So um, I started sourcing out cotton because, I couldn't wear wool socks. Um, the look was right, but I thought they would sell better in different places in cotton. So I spoke to the mill and they said, well, we don't know anything about cotton. So I said, well, sweaters exist, out there. So I sourced out the right count of cotton, sent some samples to them. They knit up the samples. I then had to send them down to North Carolina to be dyed, So all of this, resulted in then me starting my own brand. And I started it before I graduated law school, but I decided to complete that because it was important to complete that process. But I really had found my passion. And the passion was not just socks, but it was the marketing and all of the aspects that go along with that. It was a creative, outlet for me.
Okay. And also you had success in Japan. You have, I think it's called the loose sock.
Yeah, so um, I had a relationship with this Japanese company, and they had come out with the computerized machines. And this was in like 1984. And before these, anytime you wanted to change a pattern with a sock machine, it would take days. And this I just saw they put in a cassette tape that had the design program, and it immediately change the setup of the machine. So, they were demonstrating it with kind of polka dots and traditional Argyle patterns. And I said, well, can these do like the Mona Lisa or the Van Gogh? you know?
Right.
And they said yes, and they sent me samples. So I started importing what I called my art gallery collection. And so then they wanted to take the boot sock to Japan, and it was sitting basically in just boys' stores. They were marketing it to boys and men. And it was sitting in some stores, and some schoolgirls in Yokohama discovered it, the white ones. And the only freedom that they have is in their school uniforms are socks and scarves. and up until that point, it was just like Ralph Lauren knee socks that were, that they were wearing.
Okay.
So they found these socks, and all of a sudden it became, instant, like, it spread all over the country. And usually with the schoolgirls, you can't market to them. They have to choose it themselves. And usually it's in and out. It doesn't last for very long. But this lasted for 10 years, and it's still going on now. Not a lot less, but it lasted for 9 years. So I often say that our house in San Francisco was built and paid for by the Japanese schoolgirls.
Well, I got to tell you, earlier you said John Candy with the passing the bar. I thought about that when I was reading your bio. When I was reading your bio about the loose sock, I was thinking of Sinatra back in the 40s at the Paramount Theater, I think Paramount Theater, and the Bobby Soxers, how they used to have it with the socks, if you
Yeah,
remember about
yeah,
Sinatra history. So, okay, very cool. Okay.
yeah,
What I want to talk about, I want to read something. It's a little lengthy, but I want to give my viewers context because this part of the interview is really means a lot to me. What I want to talk to you about, that lady behind you who I adore, Irene. So I'm going to read this and then we'll talk about it on the other side, okay?
yeah.
Okay. So a few years back, I watched a documentary called The Last Resort, made in 2018. I don't know if you ever saw that documentary,
Yes,
okay, about Miami Beach. It was all about Miami Beach back in the 1970s. I knew a lot about that era because from 1975 to 1980, I lived there with my dad and attended both Biscayne Elementary School and graduated from Treasure Island Elementary School in 1980. I was talking to an old friend and I mentioned I saw The Last Resort, and he told me, you must watch this documentary called Irene Williams, Queen of Lincoln Road. Well, not only did I know Lincoln Road well from my dad taking me there to the old Lincoln Road movie theater, we shopped on Lincoln Road as well many times. I watched the documentary and fell in love with Irene because she was the type of person who, during my years there, inhabited the Miami Beach culture before prices for apartments went up so high they ran them up north. I don't know if it was Delray Beach or Boca, but they ran all of that group pretty much out of Miami Beach because it got so high, especially when Miami Vice came in with the Art Deco. They started redoing hotels. So it became very costly.
Well, if I may interject as well, the other thing that happened that drove a lot of people out of South Beach was the Cuban refugees.
That's
So
true.
that's something that also caused an exodus. And I'll explain that because Irene was the only person that stayed
She was got,
because
which,
she couldn't afford to go.
right. And talking to that, and we'll come back to that. I was there when it happened because you remember they made Scarface and they showed
Yeah,
footage of when they came, and then they ran them off because they were mad because they said you're making the Cuban population there look bad because you're talking about the crime. But in reality, I'm not saying every Cuban person that came, but there was a lot of crime did go up considerably because you
yeah,
know and I know that Castro let out a lot of criminals, a lot of the
yes,
mentally insane, and that's who came
yes,
over on the Mariel boat lift.
yes, yes.
So go if you want to talk about that before I
No,
finish the
no,
other part. Go
no,
ahead.
no. Let's go on.
Okay. So where was I? So the documentary was so wonderful. And not only have I watched it at least 5 times, I had my better half Debbie and friends watch it too. They all loved it. You not only directed it, but it won over 12 awards, including Hamptons Film Festival Best Short and Frameline Best Short. Irene wasn't just a subject for your documentary, but you loved her and she loved you. And it came through as many times as I watch it. I don't want to give the ending away. I want people to watch it. But the whole thing, I think it's 23 minutes. I think it's all in
Yeah.
about 23. It's just a beautiful, beautiful documentary. That's how I came about finding you, and I was glad that I found your YouTube channel, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and was able to reach out to you to do this interview. So what I would like to do, and you can come back to the Cuban part about the crime, but talk about, Eric, anything you would like about Irene and your documentary, whatever you want.
Well, let's see where I can start. You know, well, as the documentary said, I used to, when I lived in New York, I used to take these weekend getaways down to South Beach. But I had a long history with South Beach because my great grandmother was one of the elder people that was living in the hotels down there. And she lived at the Lamar on Ninth and Washington. And so that's where she lived. And then my grandparents, you mentioned Treasure Island, lived on Treasure Island. So, I was going down there, I would say in the 60s, 70s, 80s. So I was familiar with Miami Beach, and I loved it because you could get on the plane from New York and, at 7 in the morning and be in the beach by noon, you know? So, and this was at the time when video cameras were getting small and portable. And I had been shooting, just on a VHS when VHS came out, but I was always interested in that instantaneous aspect of photography. And before the video camera, I was very into Polaroids. So I would shoot Polaroids. And then when the video cameras, I was traveling in Japan, and the first place that I would always go to was the electronics stores because they were the ones that were making everything small. They were the ones that had the Walkmans for music, and you remember those.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And so when the cameras became like something you could hold up in your hand, I would just carry it around and film things that I found interesting. And, I never really intended to make any documentaries or anything. I was just recording for my own pleasure. And, um, you know, my archive, which was all analog from the 80s and 90s, I had about over 200 tapes and stuff. And I recently had them digitized, and now I'm organizing them and going through everything. But Irene came out of that archive. And, so let me step back and just say how I met her. So I was walking along Lincoln Road as the uh, documentary mentions. And, one day I see this small woman all in hot pink walking up Lincoln Road. And then the next day I saw her in purple. And I'm like, who is this person? And she was, kind of very small and interesting. And I asked people, if they knew her. And they said, no, we see her here every day. And she's been here for years, but we don't know anything about her. And I didn't have my camera at the time. And then I just decided I wanted to meet her. So I waited and hung around and stalked Lincoln Road for a couple of days. And then all of a sudden, I see her coming on the tram. She gets off the tram, and I followed her and then just stopped her to talk to her. And the wonderful thing is that opening scene is my first meeting with her. And I just thought, who is this person inside these clothes? And when I saw what was, you know, just the essence of who she was, I thought, this is someone special. And I decided that's who I wanted to hang out with and get to know better, and my friends who were down there kind of like looked at me, a little crazy, because they were more interested in going to the beach and, hanging out with the beautiful muscle guys and all of that. And I'm like hanging out with this woman, who's like 4 feet something and, eccentric. But, she was more interesting to me than that scene. And so I asked her to tea the next day, and that began, really a 9 year friendship. And I would take my camera out and just film, our time together. And after she passed away, I wanted to do something with my archive and the footage. So I said, let me start with Irene. And I had a lot of friends who were in the documentary filmmaking world in San Francisco, where I had moved to in 1998. And I, just checked around and I gave the footage to an editor and I said, here's the footage. Tell me what you think. And they came back to me and they said, well, I think that this is really about not just her, but your relationship with her, because I didn't originally see myself as part of the story, but
Hmm.
she says, you're in it. The intimacy of you behind the camera with her is really part of what the story was about. So we put together a rough cut, and I said, well, let me just send it to, the audience that I think would be interested. And at the time, the Miami Gay and Lesbian Film Festival, seemed like a good place to possibly have an audience for it. But it wasn't finished. It had all, you know, like Beatles music in it and all of that in the original cut. And I contacted the director. Her name was Carol Coombs at the time, the programming director. And she says, "Oh my God, this is amazing." And Planet Out is doing a short uh, competition for short films, and I would love for you to submit this, but it's got to be under 20 or 23 minutes or 20 minutes or something like that. So we edited it for that time frame, and I said, "Oh, we'll never win anything. It's kind of ridiculous, but sure, let's do it." So the next thing I know is she's calling me up and saying, they not only accepted it, your film won their best short, in the competition, which meant that it would screen at that festival. There was money involved, $2,000, which was, not a lot, but, it was, enough to cover some expenses, but they said, you have to clear the music rights. Do you have rights to the music that's in there? I said, ay, ay, ay,
Hmm.
no, I don't. So then I said, give me a week. So I scrambled and was able to find people to come up with music, to fill in all the, different places that I had music that I didn't have licenses to. And long story short, I was able to redo all the music for the week, submit it to the thing, and get it accepted.
That's great.
Yeah. So that's kind of the genesis of how, that happened. But, my intention initially, as I was filming was never to see it as a for the end purpose of creating a documentary. So it was kind of wonderful, and everything just kind of fell into place. And I often said that Irene was really kind of like looking down and kind of pulling all the different little strings to make it happen. But, she was an amazing person. And my husband, Mark, often said he coined it a cross between Harold and Maude meets Grey Gardens.
There you go. There you go. Ruth Gordon.
Yeah. But she was someone that was resourceful. She was someone that was independent and
Yes.
someone that was so original. And, I just appreciated that I connected with that.
Yeah.
And I thought, and then, it was interesting. After the documentary screened in Miami, people came up to me and said, I've seen her for years and I've never said hello to her, and I wish I would have said something. And it was a great lesson because there's people like this all around us,
Yes.
you know, and I just happened to record and capture it, but there were stories and interesting people. So I would say, it's a great lesson. If you see someone, go up to them, take a chance, get to know them.
Well, to that talking point, Eric, my friend Tammy, she lives in South Carolina. I had her watch it. She watched it like 3 times. She's back to back. She
Yeah,
brought up when Irene said in documentary about how she felt alone, but she was always there for people, but they were never there for her.
exactly.
Which that resonated because that's a lot of times. I mean, she was just she's as my father. She reminds me of my dad just as a woman. They're one of one. You can't. There's nobody else like Irene.
Oh, she spoke her mind. I saw that clip that you had on your father,
Yeah,
and I love that.
yeah.
And we'll talk about that maybe afterwards, because my father, who's still alive, and I'm visiting them now here in East Hampton for the summer, he's 95 and has been an activist all of his life. So we could talk about that later. But
Okay.
I love that she spoke her mind and she wasn't afraid, you know, of offending people. I
Yeah.
mean, she wasn't offensive, but she spoke her mind, and a lot of people don't do that.
No. No. I love when she was directing you. Okay, Eric, get the shoes. I love that about her.
Yeah.
That's I'm telling you, when I see
Oh,
her, I see my
she was
dad.
very aware. She was
Yeah.
very aware.
And let me tell you something, and you know this, we're not that maybe I don't know how many years older you are. I'm 57, but when
I'm
she was
68
okay,
last
60. So
week.
okay, oh, okay. Well, happy early birthday to you. When she was a stenographer, but I loved how with a typewriter, manually, not on a computer, like she told the lady that came in. Oh, I'm glad she didn't. She can go find a computer on Miami Beach for that price. But how she knew how to line it up and all that stuff. And I'm sure
She taught herself.
yeah, she was,
She taught herself. She didn't want to work for
yes.
anyone else, so she got a typewriter and opened up a business, not knowing anything about anything. And her letters of complaint are the best. They're one page, you know, um, like letters to Greyhound, where, she took a ride on Greyhound and she would go to the library, find out who the president of
Ah,
Greyhound was, address the letter to him, start off the letter with the phrase, Greyhound takes you across America, dot, dot, dot. But, but along the way, something happened and she had a complaint, and she would always get responses. And the great thing too, it's a little side note. The Jewish Museum in Miami Beach has all of her archives. They accepted the hats that I had in her archive and also the letters and papers that I saved and rescued. So those are all at the Jewish Museum,
okay,
and they did an exhibition as well. I forget, like maybe 5 years ago,
okay.
at the Jewish
Yeah,
Museum.
I actually
So
have a note. I have a note here about that. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, what else?
So, no, let's talk about that quick because you said the Jewish Museum, which I saw a video, as you said, many of her hats and things that she made, and you just talked about that. Where is that located? Is that on Miami Beach?
Yes, it's in South Beach at I think 4th and something, like Washington and 4th. It's down below 5th Street.
Okay. All right. Let me ask you this.
Yeah. I
If
mean,
I
if you Google it, you can look it up and find the address.
okay. The other thing I was asking, wasn't she originally from Massachusetts and went to Florida?
Yes, she was originally from Revere, Massachusetts, which is a
Okay.
beach town, and there was really nothing there for her. She was, it was cold in the winters, as she described, and kind of a cultural thing. So I think she moved down there. Now, she never really discussed dates or her age, because the one time I tried to ask her age, she says, "That's a question you just don't ask somebody." So I did ultimately find out after she passed how old she was. But
Right.
in any case, uh, she was from that town and she came down to Miami with nothing and worked at, I think, the Fontainebleau Hotel for a while as a hostess.
My father
And
worked there
then
too.
in the 60s, and she, so yeah, her work history, was just basically going from like hostess job to hostess job until she realized that she was working for someone as a secretary. He was trying to take advantage of her, and you don't take advantage of Irene because one strike, you're out.
Oh, I saw. Oh, we're gonna talk about that too. Oh, I got notes, man. I got notes on Irene. I watched
So
everything.
anyway, so she, like she says, she, bought herself a typewriter and taught herself how to type and opened up a business. And she was so public stenographers, a lot of people don't know what, in your audience may not know what a public stenographer is, but they're not just a notary, they're like a person with a typewriter because computers didn't exist,
Right.
and they would hire stenographers to do typing for them.
You're like court
And
stenographers.
right. And well, there are court stenographers and then there are public stenographers. And in South Beach in Miami, you had these people that were coming down, the snowbirds, And this is before computers, and they often needed someone to do letters or leases or anything, resumes. And that's what she ended up doing. And she even did Orson Welles was down there for
Huh.
something, at one point, and she worked with Orson Welles.
Ah,
So, you
wow.
know, and those letters are in the archive as well down there.
Great.
But, you know, she was on the cusp right when computers were coming out, and she was not about to retire, but she was, her office was not as busy as it was, in the past, mostly due to computers and people
Right.
having them, but for people that didn't have them, occasionally she would get someone coming in, requesting, something. But she was on that verge of just, and I think that's what also forced her to think about, just closing her business and retiring.
Right.
So that was, one of the nails in the coffin. But her age was also, she was, it was her time.
Right. Okay. And you just, and I'm going to go off camera for a minute. Usually I'll do this, but I got to pull this off the wall because you said something. That's another deal with my dad. So you said she worked at the Fountain Blue.
Yes.
This is a picture. This is my dad. This is his best friend. This is the Fountain Blue in the 1950s. They worked in the La Ronde room. It had a staircase that went up the stairs. And he worked there in the 60s because he took my mother to see Sinatra, who used to play at the Fountain Blue
Yeah.
quite a bit.
Well,
So
their
there's
paths
there's
may have
another
crossed. Who
tie-in.
knows?
What's that?
I said their paths may have crossed. Who
Yeah, that's what I'm
knows?
thinking. They may
But
very well have.
she didn't discover her her clothing until that period. So she came from Revere as just as someone that was non-distinguishable.
Right,
And, she kind of evolved into this out of necessity because she couldn't afford the clothes that she liked. And she just, she taught herself how to sew and she would start making her clothes. And she said every time she would walk out of the house, she would get these compliments. So that's how she decided that this was going to be her style. And her nephew, who I met later on, told a very funny story because she had this sister that was kind of like that didn't understand her. It was his mother, you know, and she didn't understand her and, would come down and would be embarrassed by her. Um, and so after she died, she was coming, or no, she was going to her husband's funeral, to the sister's husband's funeral up north, coming back to Massachusetts. And the sister says, "You're wearing black, aren't you?" you know? And first of all, you don't tell Irene what to wear. And
exactly.
black is like, the color of death, and she would never be caught dead in it. So she wore a bright red boots and bright red what do you call it? Like the waterproof stuff, like patent leather.
Okay. Oh God. Okay.
So that's, she was a devil.
Yeah, she was something. Is she Eric? Is she buried in Miami or is she cremated? What?
You know, I I think she's buried in Revere.
Oh, in Revere. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the family buried her in Revere. But, she had nieces and nephews, she was never married. Um, and she had some nieces and nephews. The sister had passed away. She was close to, I would say, one of the nephews,
Okay.
but most of them were kind of like they looked at her like the pink sheep of the
The
family.
pink sheep, not the black sheep.
Yeah,
Okay. So let me ask you this. She said in a documentary she had no interest in because you asked her, I'm pretty sure you asked her about does she sell her stuff? And she said she had
yeah.
no interest in selling the stuff because if you sell it, I forget the exact words that she said,
Oh,
but she
she
was
says
against that.
once you sell something and you try to commercialize it or make a business out of it, it's not the same thing. You don't have the enjoyment for yourself. And also, you're not going to see everybody else wearing it.
There you go. There you go. Now, I got a special note here because I found something out. I found another video and it's on your channel now that I realize your channel is World Love. So there's the 10 minutes almost outtakes. So I got
Yes.
to ask you this question because here's another tie-in with my dad. One of my favorite, if not favorite restaurants as a kid, which I don't know which one you went to, but I got a feeling it might have been Miami Shores. You guys are eating, you walk in and you're eating at Morrison's cafeteria. We lived at Morrison's cafeteria. So curious, do you remember which one that was? What location?
Where were we at? Was there one on 23rd Street?
I know Wolfie's was on
No,
21st or
that was
23rd.
Wolfie's.
Right.
No, this one was when we were out and about, and I took her in those scenes to the shopping malls up in Ventura or something like that,
Aventura?
Aventura
Okay,
or
yeah.
something. We took her to the malls and then to, Versace, and then we went over to Marshall's as a
Okay.
contrast. It was that visit, so it was in
Okay.
in that area.
Okay, I forget that area. I think I know what you're
It's
talking
like
about.
Aventura,
Hialeah? Is it? Did you? Well, not Hialeah.
probably, yeah, it could have been
It
Hialeah.
was. I don't know if it's Hialeah, but there's a racetrack, and you go around the corner, and I forget what area that's called. But
Yeah.
okay, all right. And
No, but I love that because the cafeterias were also part of my history. We used to go with my grandparents to the cafeterias.
well, you remember the Concord cafeteria that was dying in the late '70s across from Woofie's. I don't know
Yeah,
if you remember
yeah.
that. Yeah, it was famous for a long time. Okay, you talked about your '80s and '90s archives, what you're doing there. So I'm going to segue into another question, something you're working on. So you're preserving the archive of Peter Berlin, stage name, his early life by planning shows of his work throughout the world. Now, Berlin was born, and I cannot say his name, but can you say his name? Because there's like six names. Can you say it?
It's Armin Baron Hagen von Heunigen-Hühne.
There you go. Okay. Born on December 28, 1942. He's a German-American photographer, artist, filmmaker, clothing designer, sewer, and model in the 1970s. His two films, Nights in Black Leather, 1973, and That Boy, 1974, looks like, helped bring gay male erotic films artistic legitimacy. Is all of that true so far?
Yeah.
Okay, talk about this project.
Well, it's not so much as a project. Again, you know, um, I met Peter. I knew about him because I saw him in the 70s and 80s on Fire Island in New York. He was kind of iconic. And he lived in San Francisco and lives there to this day. And in 2004, when I was in Miami screening my Irene, his documentary was also there because some friends of mine had worked on making his documentary. And he was in South Beach, and we all hung out together. And I said, "Oh, when we get back to San Francisco, let's get together. I'd love to, at least buy a photograph from you and blah, blah, blah." And we came back, and, you know, also just totally unintended, I just kind of was really drawn to this person. And I seem to have this, I call myself a hag fag.
I see you said
I'm
that in a documentary.
yes, I'm attracted and interested in, elder people, like, and interesting people and people that live on the outside and not mainstream. And Peter Armin is in that category. So, he's lived as an outsider all of his life. And when I met him, he didn't really have any interest in his archive, didn't have any interest because he basically took thousands and thousands of self-portraits. And this is in the analog days, you know, and so he was sitting on this archive that, historically, you know, would be worth preserving and significant, which he didn't have any interest. And also, he was of limited income. And I said, "You're also sitting on something that could, with a little effort, an organization, bring you income." So that's what started that project. So, and again, I don't, you know, I don't take any money for it. I do it out of my love for him and also just my ability and interest in these things. This is where, again, going to law school, having my business background, having marketing, all of this plays into, the things that I can give back, to people. And at this point in my life, you know, um, I'm retired. I don't need to work, thank God. And, if my time left on this planet, I wanted to have purpose. And so this is just one of the ways that I can use my skills and talents and time and ability, to give back. And Peter is just one example of how I'm doing that. So, I've become, involved with him and I've done exhibitions. I've gotten a book published, so I'm kind of continuing to do, that kind of work. And there's also someone that we have hired to try to sell his archive at this point. So we're
Okay.
working on that. So
Okay.
yeah.
Let's do this, Eric. Before we segue into the second half and take a short commercial break, let's talk about your dad. I wrote a note here. Talk about your dad and his activism because you mentioned my dad as well. You know, he was an activist.
Yeah, so growing up in Long Island, my father was always an activist. In fact, he and my mom went on a first date to the Ethical Culture Society. If you know anything about the Ethical Culture Society, it's a society in New York, and I think it was mostly, you know, people of Jewish descent, but that really were more humanist. So it was a place where humanist values were promoted and talked about. And so my father, very early on, I think he was 18, 19, he grew up in Brooklyn, was in the Coast Guard for a short time. And he and my mom got married. My mom was really only 19 when they met, 20 when they married. He was about 23. And, he went into the sock business, but really his passions were in humanist issues. So he very early on got involved in, civil rights on Long Island where we lived, integrating neighborhoods. He was uh, a human rights commissioner in Nassau County in the 60s. In the 1970s, late 60s and 70s, he was doing draft counseling, you know, um, uh, trying to keep kids out of the war that didn't want to serve for conscientious reasons. Um, he, when the AIDS crisis came around, he and my mother both got involved in organizations that were, supporting people with AIDS because I became HIV positive in 1988, I think. And there were no meds, so people were dropping like flies. So one way that I think they were processing how they could help others was to join GMHC. So my so they've always been active. They're even to this day. I can send you a photo after 2 days ago at the Good Trouble March here in East Hampton. My father and mother were out there with
Oh,
signs,
they're both
you
this.
know.
Your parents are still alive. Both of them still alive.
Yes,
God
yes.
bless them.
And
Good for you.
still very active in the Democratic Party and politics, registering people to vote, walking door to door, so uh, I've had a long history, of that kind of activism and public service. And both my parents, you know, taught me to not just think of myself, but get involved in community. So anyway, there's a lot more to their activism over the years, but they've really, you know, even you'll see on my video channel, there's Grandma for Gays, my mom's mom, who is the painter, and I was very close to. And I'm also working on a project. I'll talk about that later about her. But uh, she used to march in the gay parade on top of my 23-foot long checker stretch limousine. You'll see that. And my parents used to join, and my family and brothers. So I am very, very lucky that I've had that kind of support in my life.
Okay. So then that clip I sent you, you're well aware how bad Anita Bryant was at that time.
Oh yes, yes, and I loved your father's, presence and just his not afraid to speak his mind.
Yeah.
That really came through.
Yeah, definitely. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do this. Let's take a short commercial break and then we're going to segue into the second half. Just fun, random questions. There's no right or wrong answers, okay?
Yep.
All right. Hey, folks, this is Bad Brad Berkwitt, the host of the Bad Brad Berkwitt Show on the Ringside Report web TV channel. And I want to talk to you about sponsorship. If you're interested in being a sponsor on the Bad Brad Berkwitt Show that features network guests and entertainers and people from all walks of life in business and other areas, reach out to me at Ringside Report 2014 at gmail.com. Again, that's Ringside Report 2014 at gmail.com. I'm finally in a position that I'm ready to take on sponsors. So, hey, reach out to me and let's get you on board. I want to talk to you about my book, Boxing Interviews of a Lifetime. If you watch my show, The Bad Brad Berkwitt Show, you know that I love doing 360 conversations with all types of people. Well, I made my bones in boxing over a quarter of a century ago, interviewing world champion boxers, people in the sport, and entertainers that love the sport of boxing, which led to my induction into the Florida Boxing Hall of Fame in June of 2021. And that's the ring that you see me wear all the time on my show. Well, if you like to pick up my book, Boxing Interviews of a Lifetime, go to authorhouse.com. Again, it's authorhouse.com. And if you would like to get it personally inscribed or inscribed for somebody that you're sending to as a gift, you can reach out to me and we can arrange for something as well. All right, we're now back. Eric, I'm going to throw out some questions to you. The first one is, what is your favorite genre of movies?
Comedy.
Okay. Is there a comedy that you could watch over and over again that never gets old?
Oh, gee. Well, hold it. Let me think about the first question you asked because I said comedy, and I do love comedy. Um, oh, but some of my favorite films are not comic. They're just, The Grifters. I love The
Yeah,
Grifters. I think it's
yeah.
such a great movie. It's a classic. And The Last Picture Show,
Oh,
another
great
one of my
movie.
favorites. Um, anyway,
Okay, those are two good ones.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The Last Picture. In fact, if I remember correctly, Sybil Shepherd was in that, right?
Yes, it was her first film. And the
Okay.
Bottoms Brothers, and it was Cloris Leachman.
Lawrence Leachman,
It was a
right.
great cast, and it was Peter Bogdanovich. It was black and white, and it was
Yep.
about this. Oh, it was just great.
Okay,
Loved it.
this may be a tough one. And if you can't name one, give me two. Favorite musical artist that you could listen to all the time?
Nina Simone, Aretha Franklin, Joni Mitchell. Um, uh,
All greats.
yeah.
All greats. Love Nina Simone. Okay. What is a book from your childhood that you read that still resonates with you today?
How early in my childhood?
You pick it. You pick it.
I don't know that I remember any specific one of my childhood because I didn't really. I mean, early on in childhood, it was Dick and Jane and all of those kind of things. And I would say James Baldwin, is a writer that I really love. And James Purdy, I love his short stories. So, yeah,
Okay. Okay. What is one memorable childhood memory that off the top of your head you could say?
swimming in the ocean
Okay.
at Jones Beach.
Okay.
Yeah,
Do you have a favorite food that you love?
a favorite food. I would say what I'm eating that's in front of me.
You sound like my dad. Okay. Okay. All right.
Although I don't eat red meat, I was a vegetarian for a number of years. I'm eating fish now and some chicken, but yeah, I try to eat, you know, vegetarian as when I can.
Okay. What is the first job on the books or off the books that you ever had?
A stock boy at the 5 and 10 in Merrick.
Okay. 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 What is your favorite vacation destination?
Oh, gee. I can't really say that I have a favorite. Any place that has a beach.
Okay. Okay.
I've been to Bali, I've been to, Japan, I've been to, so Europe, I've been to so many places. I haven't been to South America. I love Mexico. I love Mexico City. So, yeah.
All right. So, curiosity question, since we both share Miami Beach and we spend a lot of time there, what's the biggest change you see with the beach from
Well,
when
to
you
tell you
first
the
went
truth,
there as an adult?
well, I haven't been there in probably 5 or 6 years. And, it's all been developed now, and I think that there's a whole different, like, tourist thing happening there. It's, last time I was there, I would say it had a large South American tourist population. Um, and then just, it's kind of like, a cross between Beverly Hills and something else. It doesn't feel the same,
No,
you know.
no.
Um, and I know all things change. You know, I just remember, Ocean Avenue in the 80s, it was all abandoned at the
Yeah,
time. I could
yeah,
have bought a hotel for $250,000, you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
and I didn't do it because I just thought, with all of my responsibilities, I can't handle, a building in South Beach. But the price was like, whoa, but it changed, Lincoln Road. It was, it was the first outdoor mall
yeah.
in the world, not in the world, in the country,
Right, right. I know what you're saying.
and designed by Lapidus. And, it had some character. In fact, my uncle worked at one of the men's clothing stores in the 60s on Lincoln Road.
Well, do
Now
they
it's
even have the
all,
trolley? Do they still have the
what?
trolley? Do they still have the
No,
trolley?
they didn't have the trolley at the time.
No, no,
You
no, no.
know,
I mean now. Now, do they
I
have it?
don't know.
Okay.
I don't think
I
so.
don't think so either.
Yeah. And, now it's just all any store that you will find around the world. It's all these chain stores and luxury stores and
Yeah,
Apple and so there's really not a lot of local character.
right. I agree. I agree.
Yeah. But
Okay.
I love the Raleigh Hotel. And I remember it often because, and this was before they had renovated it. This is in the 60s. My grandparents used to, go there and play cards with their friends. So I have a lot of memories of the Raleigh. In fact, there is one scene at the Raleigh in the documentary where we met Irene in the towel outfit, and
Okay.
that's at the Raleigh.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
If you could meet one person, Eric, from any time in history, dead or alive, Who would you like to meet and what would you like to talk to them about?
Well, I would say Jesus Christ because I'd want to know if he's real. No, but I would say Martin Luther King. And I would just, want to talk to him about, and I think I know what he would say about, the things happening today, but, what we can do, how we can mobilize, how we can, you know, um, effectively deal with, what's happening,
Okay,
because it's really, um, it's dangerous and disturbing times, not just in this country, but in the world.
I agree. I agree with you. Okay. With everything we discussed today, Eric, if you had to sum yourself up as a human being, what would you say?
That I hope, uh, let's see, that I'm basically an honest, caring, giving, you know, person.
Okay. Final question for you. What is your message or hope for humanity in a time that we need to really do everything that we can to move it forward?
I would say that the only thing that's inevitable is change.
True. True.
And it's not what's happening, but how we go through it. How we treat other people is all that we can do. And I would just say be true to those ideals, to truth, honesty, and hopefully that will make some kind of impact, even though the powers that be and the powers that are in charge that I still believe are a minority. And now we're getting into politics, which I was unsure
Right, but
about
I didn't bring it
discussing.
up. You did.
No, I know, but I just I think that we have to meet this negative energy that exists in the world with and counter it with positive energy and hold on to those things because a minority of the people that are in control, I don't believe are the majority of how most people are. And somehow we have to hold on to hope that those values will prevail in the end because things change and they will change. I'm not saying that it's not going to get worse, but when it does start changing, I'm just hoping that these values are the ones that will come through and be the values that society will preserve itself. But you know, I think with climate change, the realities of that, I think we've already gone past the tipping point. So to me, we're witnessing, the end of an empire. All empires fall, you know. And I'll just tell you this one thing that I think is going on. I think that, my opinion, the underlying root is unregulated capitalism that fosters profit over people by
Yes.
any means necessary. Lying, cheating, stealing, all of those values that go along with profit and money making, it's out in the open now. And that's at the root. And I also think it doesn't help that the dismantling of systematic over the last 40 years, dismantling funding of education at the very basic level to dumb down the populations, because that's how these things take over. You can do anything with people that you know that you dumb down. And that's also, I think, part of what we're seeing. But,
You
you know,
summed it up perfectly.
and this country's history is really not built on firm footing. You know, it's built on white men stealing land, killing Indians, enslaving people, you know. So our hit this is just it's this has been it's not Trump. This has been happening a long time.
No, no, it's not. It's not. He didn't create it, but if since we're gonna
Yes,
say he threw
he
gasoline,
opened up
but
the
he didn't create
wound.
it.
He opened up the wound.
Yes.
It already existed in our history.
Well, let me ask you this, since we went there before we close out. What's your thoughts on your community under attack? Like you know, my father was fighting for, and your parents
Yes,
fought too. So
yes.
we made strides forward, but now we're going back again. So what do you have to say to that talking point?
You know, it's not just gay and lesbian and trans, people that are under attack. It's brown people, it's color people. So I'm more concerned, like your father, with humanity, with with anyone that is denied rights. So, yes, you know, I'm willing to fight for gay rights, for trans rights, and also for immigrants' rights. Everyone is under attack right now, so I think we just have to, keep that in mind.
Okay. If you would, for the viewers there, give them your YouTube channel name and your any websites or any social media platforms that you're on.
Well, I have an Instagram account, but I don't really use it. I'm not on Facebook. Um, I just have my YouTube channel, and my YouTube channel is something, it's
The
World
World of
Love,
Love, was
but
it World of Love?
yeah, it's World Love Productions, but I think it's under, can I send you a link to it and you can just
Yeah.
attach it or post it and that would be
I'll put it in the
helpful?
notes for the video. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. You know, and there I'm just going through my video archiving and posting, but most of it is my life in New York. And I'm going to continue because I also have stuff for my business and life and Japan trips. But these are things of my, like Wigstock in New York. And I was friends with Sylvia Miles. I have stuff with Sylvia Miles on there. So, there's stuff that people are interested in. I'm glad that you found it and that people are finding these things because that's what I love about YouTube is that you put something out there and you never know what's going to come out of it. So, you know, and yeah, so I'm working on it slowly.
Okay. What I'm gonna do is I want to close out with a couple thoughts and then give you the mic to close out completely. First of all, again, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you, as I said in Yiddish, what you did with this documentary with Irene is a mitzvah. Okay, the 50% European Jewish side is kicking in on me here. But it's a wonderful documentary. Anybody watching this, please check it out. She's amazing. I love her. I mean, I never met her, but I wish I did. But she
Yeah.
reminded me, like I said, of my dad so much, other than just the clothes part. But I love how she was outspoken. I love that you loved her. I love that she loved you. So thank you for putting that out. And also, I don't know if you ever heard the saying before. They say a person dies twice, once in the physical and the last time that their name is mentioned. Well, the fact that you keep mentioning Irene, I'm mentioning her now, and I'm sure there's other people, we're keeping her memory alive, and that's a good thing. I'm sure
Well,
she is
also
smiling
this
down.
documentary, preserves a story that was unique and that, you know, I am so happy and proud that I was able to preserve her story so her life had meaning, not just for people that knew her, but anyone now that can go back and see her and have these things. So in many ways, she's living on,
Absolutely.
and that's really a great feeling.
It is. It is. I'm glad that you did it. In closing, anything you want to add to the interview, go for it.
No, I appreciated talking to you, and it was nice meeting you. And I saw a little bit of your website, which is also, you're doing a lot of interesting, good work out there. And I want to thank you for the work that you're bringing in the world because I think that we all have to do our parts to bring to the world love and compassion and sanity in whatever ways that we can. And I think that you're doing it, I'm doing it, and if enough of us do it, there's hope.
I agree. We'll end on that note. Have a great day. Thank you again for coming on, Eric. Let's talk soon.
Okay. Yes, thank you.